And they start off with this idea that God is one, and then they fail to realize that God is many at the same time, which is essentially why I think for us it's hard to get the idea that we are God also. That this, and what you see is God. This whole experience is one thing, yes, but we get God as one, but we don't realize it's one as many also. So there's a singularity about God, but there's also a multiplicity at the same time. So we have inside it, but that's true about us. We can always say I, but essentially there's many inside here. And if you've ever scratched the surface of your personality, you'll find that there are many other sub-personalities within you, and they're marching to many different drums, and they don't always agree with what your mouth is saying. And sometimes you don't agree with what your mouth is saying because they've taken over, right? You go, did I say that? It's not an unusual thing. It is the thing. It is what's happening almost all the time. Anna was speaking earlier about becoming humble and reducing your ego, but the ego is just the guy who's trying to orchestrate this whole thing. And a substitute for the ego would be the Holy Spirit or the self or the divine or your soul or some name that you might call it by. When that becomes the dominant one to manage these sub-personalities, then you begin to have a life that is more orchestrated according to the best outcomes it can be, not just what seems that the sub-personality that's operative at that moment thinks is the best outcome. Now, some of these sub-personalities have come about because of trauma. Some of them have come about to protect you from trauma. And that dynamic of, and that's not all of them, but let's just talk with those. Trauma, the traumatized one, and the one to protect it. So what does the traumatized one come about? It's like often withdraws, hides, gets away, is often in the recesses, and what shows up is the one who defends. So have you ever seen a ferocious person? Underneath that ferocious person, or alongside that ferocious person that's acting that way, there is a frightened one that feels the need to be ferocious to protect it. And so you have the protector and you have the one being protected. Now, the one I would like to talk about today in general is this idea of the victim. So the victim can be caused by a prolonged stress or by an acute stress, something that happened once or not very much at all. And one of the things that has happened in this culture is that we have become to identify as a totality, as the I, as a victim way more than we used to, I think. It becomes almost a calling card to say, yes, I'm a victim of so-and-so. This is me. How are you? I'm good. I'm a victim of so-and-so. What is your name? And this becomes problematic because it's hard to really live your fullness when you let this sub-personality be the dominant aspect of your general self. And so to really move into a greater understanding of who you are, it's good to recognize there is a victim inside us, but it's good to know that that's only a part of the story. It's only one of those microbes inside this grand being of who we are. And if we will take it to heart, we can disidentify with the victim and recognize that it is just a remnant of an experience. It is perhaps our excuse now to be unpleasant to other people, to be righteous, to be angry, to feel as though we're entitled. All these things they're overlays on top of this hurt feeling. And as I've said often, I think, essentially, you can deal with your feelings if you feel your feelings. But if you choose to not feel your feelings, without this story, this is the most critical piece of the whole thing. Feel your feelings without the story, you dissipate the energy of it. But if you just tell the story and don't feel your feelings, you amplify it. You amplify the experience. You begin to have the feelings, but they're not consumed. They're just getting worse. They're getting stronger. And so the repetition of the story to the point of habituation becomes the development of taking a trauma and making you into a victim of it. If you could disassociate somehow from this need to retell the story and just feel the feelings for a while, and it may be a while, but feel the feelings without the story. And the critical thing, what is the critical thing? No story. No story. That's the secret. So I've told this story. I'm going to digress here for a minute. I was in a meditation retreat, 30-day meditation retreat. I go to see the counselor that you see every other day, and I say, it's like, so I said to her, so I should just feel the feelings and not tell the story? And she looked at me like, you are the stupidest man I have ever seen in my life. How long have you been here? Of course. Yes, that's right. Somehow she managed to keep it under wraps, but she just said, that's right. Feel the feelings. But this victim energy, which we have now given great license to, will mess us up. I mean, how are you going to be a victor and a victim? How are you going to be a lover and a victim? How can you be a saint and a victim? They don't go together. And when we advertise one aspect of ourselves to the exclusion of the true depth of who we are, we can get very lopsided. When I was studying subpersonalities, you used to have fat and skinny subpersonalities. And the one you fed got fatter. And the one that you didn't feed got skinnier. And so if you take some of the energy, which is your attention and your identification with any subpersonality, you take that away, it begins to shrink in size. And then you can use that energy and that attention toward another aspect of yourself. And so when the victim is getting all the food, it's hard to fly like an eagle, right? When you're feeding this warthog inside you, it just won't grow wings. So this is the practice, is to withdraw that. And the way to do it, really, I think skillfully to withdraw from it, is to not talk about it all the time or think about it all the time if you can help it. And if you think about it, and when you think about it, stop the story and move into the feeling state. Just feeling it, just like, where in my skin do I feel this? Where on my face do I feel it? In my gut, in my ears, where is this sensation? And intensify the awareness of the sensations that run through the body when it's having an emotion, and in becoming fully aware of that. And you may have tears, you may be flush with anger, your body may heat up, you may feel cold, there could be any sensation that goes along with this, but you feel that until it dissipates, all the while not telling the story, until something triggers that experience again, and then you feel it and cut the story, and it begins to dissipate. It's quite a trick. I had a trauma, feeling of great rejection, feeling of being disappointed in myself, feeling of being angered at other people, all kind of bundled up at once. So there was a lot of story in there. Beautifully orchestrated story I could repeat in my head very easily. And in this meditation retreat, I sat with this suffering, just sat with it. And within 2 or 3 days, it disappeared. Now, this was something that could have been a life-changing experience for me, in the sense that I could have chosen that was the way my life would be. This is me. That's my story. You know how we wear our story like a crown of thorns often, but we wear it. You know, this is my story. It shouldn't be all of who we are. It's kind of like defining the whole by the part, to say that your hand, I am my hand, I'm 5 fingers. Well, yes, you have 5 fingers, but you're not 5 fingers, you're more than that. You have a story, but it's not your whole story. You're more than that. This becomes the advancement of ourselves into another level of understanding who we are. And this shifting of the ego, which has chosen, sometimes cleverly, chosen which part to bring out in different places, and has often chosen to choose to bring out this victim for whatever reason. You know, the victim is we can often find common ground with other people when we land on our victim, right? We say, you know, my mother was mean to me my whole childhood. And someone can say, yeah, my mother was too, right? And now you have a bond. And in so many ways, that seems like it's working. But it's working to hold you in place at that level also. So, you know, it takes a little bit of creativity to come up with something that's other than your general story that has worked in the past to get people to feel sorry for you or appreciate you or something, you know, but now's another chance. And in the form of prayer, our job really around this victim is to pray that the Holy Spirit or the higher self or the grand self or the God or however you describe this energy, that it comes in and gently leads you away from this. I always like to throw gently into my prayers. The few times I have forgotten to that, I have really paid for it. I remember I was doing some deep soul searching, and I just kind of recovered, barely. I was still lying on the couch. I was still a little bit in shock at where I had been able to go inside myself. None of it all that pretty. And I said, oh, I did it. I got through that. Okay, give me your best shot. Big mistake. Really big mistake. And so I always like to throw that in. I caution all people when asking for transformation that they don't ask for it be done in 2 seconds, because it might be a little bit of a shock to the system. Anyway, coming back to the prayer, let the prayer be that we easily move away from this victim identification. We all have trauma. There's no way we can escape the trauma of life. We know almost statistically it has been proven to be true that we're all going to die. Right? Most of us, most of the time, can avoid that. And somehow we feel special that it's going to happen to everyone else. I was just at Lowe's checking out the checkout sign, and there's a man that was a few years older than me, and he was a little stooped and a little thin. And somehow I think of, oh, he's going to get older. But it's not going to happen to me. How did that happen? And I thought I was so special. And you know, we're with Unity people. We all know we're special, right? So I can imagine that in most of our minds, most of the time, we're not thinking death is near or death will happen to me, nor the thing that causes death will happen to me, whether it be a disease, old age, or an auto accident. None of that. We don't know. We don't say that. And we try to be so careful about what we say, just hoping that maybe like the word abracadabra will have some magic effect and we will never have any problems, ever. We can say the right things, we can hold the right thoughts, and boom, our life is going to be golden from here on out. Right? I hope it works. However, there's an ancient Stoic philosopher called Epictetus, and Epictetus who was a good philosopher, said this: "To accuse others of one's misfortune is the sign of want of education." But that's kind of the victim thing, right? To accuse oneself shows that one's education has begun. To accuse neither oneself nor others shows that one's education is complete. Our minds are always looking for, why did this happen? And so many times we find blame, and we find blame in others, right? Or sometimes we find blame in ourselves. But blame, in a sense, for some of the things that are going to happen to your life is probably a waste of time. One of the coolest things we've come up with in the human search for blame, in a world that is so complex that you cannot actually find the beginning of any event. You may find the last thing that happened before that, but you can't find the beginning because it stretches out ad infinitum. So you could say, the car hit me, but it was, think of all the things that came together to produce that one event, and you could not know the beginning of the whole thing, but you could imagine you do. And when you can't even imagine you do, you go, well, it must be karma. It must be out of sight. It must have been beyond, it must be another lifetime. Do you want to know another factoid? There are more people alive today than have ever lived. How much karma, you probably are the one who's been here forever, but many of us, somebody here must have been here, this must be their first time around, so how much karma could they get? Karma is a nice way of saying, oh, it must be me that caused this. I'll take the blame. But Epictetus, I think, was right. Stop blaming others or yourself and get on with it. Deal with it and move on. Stop the blame game, including karma. I think we'd be better off. So, this release from I'm special by realizing that things happen to everybody. That they happen to everybody and we don't have to blame somebody for it. Leaves us in the position where we can stop telling that story, because there's not a lot to learn from it necessarily, and get right down to the feeling state and be done with it. And then we move to another state of freedom where we could be something other than the victim, because the victim isn't the most active energy in our global self. And we could choose from all these other personalities to show up at another time. You could go to the party and you could be the life of the party rather than the designated sad sack over there in the corner, right? You could take on a new aspect which has already existed within you. You already have that. It's already present. It may be skinny as everything. It may have been starved, but you could feed it with your attention and your love. And so this whole little talk here is about to begin. You're probably beginning to feel victimized that I just keep rambling on about this, but I'm just trying to impress upon you that if we could let that go, there is enormous energy that has been holding that we could free up for something else. And since we are so complex already, we already have the next thing in our repertoire. It could be undeveloped, it could be rusty, but it is there. You were born whole. We just practice being something that we're easily defined by. I think it's largely a lack of creativity and it's an unwillingness to explore that has caused us to repeat ourselves so often. And so we could explore that, expand that. We could be, as the Army invites us, all we can be. We could do that. Take this opportunity to make the prayer that gently we release the hold that the victim has on us. And if you don't think you're a victim, but you're angry and frustrated or depressed, you might want to look again to see what's active in there that's causing those emotions. Maybe not as the primary experience, but as a secondary response, still holding that victim energy. Victim, everybody's a victim. Have you noticed on the radio? It's not that the hurricane happened. It's a victim of the hurricane. It's a victim of all these. I don't even know how to all the things but you know what I'm talking about. They just pick them. Everything's a victim of this, a victim of that. Maybe. But it doesn't help to think of yourself that way. It helps to deal with the emotion. It helps to understand and process to the best of your ability. It helps to let it go. As Deepak Chopra said, a victim is somebody who cannot stop hurting. So these are the techniques to stop hurting and step into another life. So let's do a little prayer now.